Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to jump into the legal weeds.
That's what we like to hear. And today we're tackling two terms that can be real head scratchers, even for folks who are usually on top of their legal game.
Oh, you mean jurisdiction and appearances? Yeah, those
Mhm.
can definitely trip people up.
Exactly. They sound all lawyery and complicated, but honestly, understanding them can be a lifesaver if you ever, find yourself caught up in a legal situation.
Couldn't agree more. It's like having a secret weapon in your back pocket.
Totally. So let's break it down. First up, jurisdiction. Essentially, this is all about figuring out which court has the power to hear a case. Like, can you imagine suing someone in a completely random state where they have no connection?
Right. That just wouldn't fly. It's like trying to order pizza from a restaurant that's hundreds of miles away. They just can't deliver to you.
Perfect analogy. So the court needs to have some sort of authority over the defendant, right? And that's where general jurisdiction comes in.
Exactly. General jurisdiction is like a court's home turf. It's where they have the strongest authority, and it usually boils down to where someone lives or where a company has its main operations.
So if I live in Texas, I can pretty much expect any lawsuits against me to land in a Texas court.
Most likely, yes. It's like saying, this is where you're planted, so this is where we'll handle legal matters related to you.
Makes sense. But here's where I get a little confused. Under general jurisdiction, can someone be sued for something that happened in a completely different state?
Yep, you got it. It doesn't matter where the actual issue went down. If a court has general jurisdiction over you, they can hear any claim against you, even if it happened on the other side of the country.
Wow, that seems kind of intense. So a company headquartered in New York could get sued there for something that happened in California, even if they don't have any offices or anything in California.
Precisely. General jurisdiction is powerful like that.
Hmm.
It's all about that strong connection to the state where the court is located.
Okay, definitely something to keep in mind. But let's move on to specific jurisdiction. This one sounds a bit more, well, targeted, right?
You hit the nail on the head. Specific jurisdiction is all about the defendant's actions in a particular state, even if they don't live there permanently.
Ah, so it's less about where they're based and more about what they did in that specific state.
Exactly. Let's say you have a company based in Florida that sells a product that ends up injuring someone in Texas. Even though the company's in Florida, Texas could have specific jurisdiction because the product caused harm within its borders.
Oh, I see. That makes sense from a fairness perspective. You wouldn't want to make the injured person travel all the way to Florida to sue.
Right, exactly. It's all about making sure the lawsuit is heard in a place that has a clear connection to the case. But keep in mind, it's not just about location. Courts also consider whether the defendant intentionally directed their activities towards the state and whether the lawsuit directly relates to those activities.
Right, so there needs to be a strong link between the defendant's actions and the state where the lawsuit is filed. Like, just visiting a state for vacation probably wouldn't give that state jurisdiction over you for everything.
You got it. Specific jurisdiction is very specific, just like the name implies. It requires a clear connection between the defendant's actions in the state and the lawsuit itself.
This is all starting to make so much more sense now. But I'm curious, what if you find yourself in a situation where you think the court shouldn't have jurisdiction over you? Is there any way to push back on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where appearances come into play. How you appear in court can actually determine whether you can challenge jurisdiction at all.
Oh, interesting. So there's a strategy involved even in just showing up. I can see where this is heading.
You're catching on quickly. But we'll save that fascinating discussion for the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Okay, so let's dig into this whole appearances thing. We know it's important to show up in court the right way, but what does that even mean in practical terms?
Think of it like going to a party.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I love a good party analogy.
You can walk in, grab a drink, start mingling, really get into the swing of things. That's like making a general appearance.
So you're fully participating, embracing the party vibe.
Precisely. But you could also just pop in, say a quick hello to the host, maybe drop off a gift, and then head out.
Ah, a quick in and out, less commitment.
Right. That's more like a special appearance in the legal world.
Got it. So in court, a general appearance is basically saying, I'm here, let's do this.
Exactly. You're acknowledging the court's authority, ready to engage in the legal process.
But we talked about how crucial it is to challenge jurisdiction if you think the court is the wrong place for your case. So does making a general appearance affect that?
It absolutely does. Once you make a general appearance, you basically waive your right to object to the court's jurisdiction later on.
Oh, wow. So it's like accepting the invitation to the party, even if you later realize you don't really want to be there.
That's a great way to put it. And here's the tricky part. You don't always have to make a grand entrance to make a general appearance. Even seemingly small actions can count.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, filing certain motions or participating in settlement discussions, without specifically stating that you're reserving your right to object to jurisdiction.
So you could accidentally give the court power over your case without even realizing it.
It's definitely a possibility, especially if you're not familiar with all the legal nuances. That's why having a good lawyer by your side is so important. They can make sure you're taking the right steps and not accidentally shooting yourself in the foot.
Right. You don't want to stumble into a legal trap. So let's say you do realize the court might not have jurisdiction over you. How do you make that special appearance? How do you say, hey, I'm just here to drop off this legal argument, not to stay in party?
That's where a motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction comes into play.
Ah, so you're specifically challenging the court's authority.
Exactly. You're basically saying, hold on a second, court. Before we even start talking about the case itself, let's figure out if you have the right to be hearing this at all.
So it's like a preliminary step, a way to question the court's power before you get into the actual nitty-gritty of the lawsuit.
Precisely. And it's important to file this motion early on before you do anything that could be seen as a general appearance. Remember, timing is crucial in legal matters.
Got it. So no mingling at the legal party until we've established if we're even at the right party. But what if the court doesn't agree with your challenge? What if they say, nope, we think we do have jurisdiction over you? Is that it? Game over.
Not necessarily. You typically have the right to appeal the court's decision to a higher court.
Ah, so you can get a second opinion from a more experienced judge.
Exactly. It's a safeguard built into the legal system to ensure fairness and that things are done properly.
So even if you lose that initial battle, there's still a chance to win the war, so to speak.
You got it. But it's important to remember that every case is unique, and the specific rules and procedures can vary depending on the location and the type of lawsuit involved.
Wow, this whole world of appearances and jurisdiction is so much more nuanced than I ever imagined.
It definitely can be. But that's why we're doing these deep dives, to shed light on these complex legal concepts and give people the knowledge they need to navigate these waters.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, especially in the legal realm. So now that we've tackled appearances, are you ready to unveil the specific weapons in our legal arsenal, the actual motions we can use to challenge jurisdiction? Okay, so we've talked about where you can be sued and the importance of making the right appearance in court. But how do you actually challenge jurisdiction if you think you're in the wrong court? What are the tools you can use?
Yeah, it's all about using the right motion at the right time. These motions are kind of like your legal weapons, each designed for a specific purpose.
Okay, so I'm picturing a legal toolbox filled with all sorts of powerful motions. Which one is the most commonly used to challenge jurisdiction?
One of the most common is a motion to dismiss for lack of personal jurisdiction. Basically, this motion argues that the court doesn't have the power to make you, the defendant, participate in the lawsuit.
So it's like saying, hey, court, sorry, you can't drag me into this fight because I don't have enough of a connection to this place.
Exactly. This motion goes back to those key factors we discussed earlier: purposeful availment, claim connection, and fairness. You're essentially trying to show that your ties to the state where the lawsuit was filed are too weak to justify making you defend yourself there.
Can you give us a real-world example?
Sure. Imagine you have a small online business based in, say, Vermont. You get sued by someone in California who claims they were harmed by something they saw on your website.
Oh, I see where this is going.
A motion to dismiss for lack of personal jurisdiction could be your best friend in this situation. You'd argue that simply having a website accessible in California doesn't automatically mean you were intentionally doing business there, or that the lawsuit is directly related to your activities in California.
Right. Just because anyone, anywhere can visit your website doesn't mean you're subject to lawsuits everywhere.
Exactly. But what if the problem isn't about jurisdiction itself, but about how you found out about the lawsuit in the first place?
You're talking about being served with the legal papers, right? What if they didn't follow the proper procedure?
That's right. In that case, you might file a motion to quash service of process. This motion challenges the way you were notified about the lawsuit. There are very specific rules about how you have to be served with those legal documents.
So it's like saying, hey, court, you can't just slide this lawsuit under my door and expect me to show up. There's a right way to do this.
Exactly. And if those rules weren't followed correctly, you can use this motion to argue that the whole lawsuit is invalid from the start.
Wow, so many legal hoops to jump through. But let's say you file one of these motions and the judge just isn't buying it. What happens then?
Well, as we touched on earlier, you usually have the option to appeal the judge's decision. You take it to a higher court and see if they agree with you.
Ah, so it's like getting a second opinion, maybe from someone with a little more experience.
Precisely. The appeals process is there to make sure that everyone gets a fair shake and that the legal process is being followed correctly.
Okay, so even if you lose that initial battle, the war isn't necessarily over.
Exactly. But again, every case is different, and the specific rules and procedures can vary depending on, the location and the type of lawsuit involved.
Wow, I'm telling you, this whole deep dive has been such an eye-opener. I feel like we've gone from feeling totally lost in the legal weeds to actually understanding these concepts and how they can protect us.
That's the goal. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to legal matters.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, everyone, this deep dive is for informational purposes only. It's not a substitute for actual legal advice.
Right. If you're ever facing a real legal issue, always reach out to a qualified attorney who can give you advice specific to your situation.
Well said. All right, folks, that's a wrap on another deep dive. I don't know about you, but I feel way more informed and empowered to navigate the legal world. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one.